You're watching EBS, the European Broadcast System. The following program is made possible in part by a generous grant from EHOP, the European House of Pancakes.
Hi, I'm Steve Ricks, and join me today as we visit several countries in Europe and look at the International Financial Reporting Standards for Small and Medium-Sized Entities, or for short, the SMEs. So, why should we study the International Accounting Standards for Small and Medium-Sized Entities? Well, the problem is that public companies are increasingly moving toward international GAAP, and US GAAP is getting increasingly more difficult for private companies. And let's face it, many items in GAAP are just not relevant to private companies. So, exactly what is the International Accounting Standards Board? Well, first, it's based here in London. It's overseen by the International Accounting Standards Committee Foundation, which is a private, not-for-profit corporation, just like the TV station you're watching now. The current board has 5 members from the United States and 5 members from the European Union. So, I thought it would be a great idea to travel through some of these European countries to learn more about this exciting set of standards. So, let's travel to our first stop, Italy.
The following portion of Steve Ricks' International Travel and Accounting is brought to you by a grant from VFC.
The original goal was to provide standards for entities in countries that have no GAAP, and this would provide a framework for entities not large enough to adapt the International Financial Reporting Standards. So, tell me, sir, what would be the definition of a small or medium-sized entity?
Well, these would be entities that publish general-purpose financial statements, but don't have public accountability.
And so, in the US, that would pretty much describe a typical mid-sized company, don't you think?
How would I know? I live here, in Italy.
Well, what I can tell you as far as US private companies are concerned, they're not required to use any particular basis of accounting. And the SME provides another option.
But why?
Because in May of 2008, the AICPA officially recognized the IASB, and thus SME is now considered GAAP. And now we're off to romantic France.
This portion of Steve Ricks' International Travel and Accounting is brought to you by a generous grant from Croissant Way. For a limited time only, €5 for any 30-centimeter croissant.
Here in France, we're going to look at some of the basic concepts of the framework. One of the important things is that the statements, just like US GAAP, are prepared on the accrual basis. An important topic to discuss would be valuation. Most items are measured at historical cost, but it does require revaluation of investment property and biological assets to fair value. It also requires certain categories of financial instruments to be measured at fair value. And any items subject to impairment are also carried at fair value. Why, hello, sir. May I ask you about going concern? Well, how long a period should we consider? I see, at least 1 year. So, could you tell us some of the requirements of financial statements? Oh, that's right, you don't talk. Let me throw you some hints and see if you get this. Perhaps understandability and relevance? How about reliability and materiality? And how about how to falsify financial statements? Oh, no, I'm just trying to pull a fast one over on you. We know that's not true. How about substance over form? Prudence? Completeness? yes, comparability. Anything else? Oh, timeliness. You're good at this. Oh, yes. And finally, the balance of cost to benefit. Well, I'd really like to thank you for taking time to talk with me today. Talk.
Oui, monsieur. It was my pleasure.
I'll see you next in Storybook Germany.
This portion of Steve Rick's International Travel and Accounting is provided in part by a generous grant from Schnitzel Bell.
Ich will Schnitzelbell.
Here in Germany, land of fairy tale castles, we're going to learn about financial statements. And to help me out with sharing what should be included in the full set of financial statements, let's talk to this knowledgeable young lady.
Guten Tag.
Well, hello to you as well. So, what should we expect to find? I suppose we would have a statement of financial position?
Ja, und then a statement of comprehensive income and income.
Well, that's similar to what we have in the States.
Yeah, but there are two options. You could have a single statement of both, or you could use a two-statement approach.
Ah, that's fascinating. What else would we expect to find? Perhaps a statement of changes in equity?
Yeah!
A statement of cash flows?
Yeah!
Anything else?
Don't forget your footnotes.
Very good. We don't want to do that now, do we? So, what kinds of things will we want to find in those footnotes?
Well, you have four main things.
No, wait, let me guess. The statement of compliance with the standards, the accounting policies, estimates and judgments, and required information not included in the primary statements.
Yeah, sehr gut.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And now, let's look at those disclosures in a little more detail in rugged Scotland.
Ooh, Scotland.
This portion of Steve Rick's International Travel and Accounting is brought to you by a generous grant from McDougall's. Try a McDougall's McHaggis sandwich for breakfast. I'm liking it.
While there are many similarities between US GAAP and SME, there are also quite a few differences. Here I am in Scotland with Duncan Munro. Can you tell me some of the differences between SME and GAAP?
Well, first, under the accounting policies, there's a lot more structure under GAAP than SME.
I'm sure that could allow a lot more freedom in preparing the statements.
Freedom!
Well, how do you handle comprehensive income? We handle it in 3 ways in the United States.
You're not allowed to put it in the statement of equity in SME.
Fascinating. Well, why don't you tell me about your disclosures?
For most areas, the disclosures are much simplified.
And how do you deal with extraordinary items?
No items are allowed to be called extraordinary.
Wow, that's extraordinary.
You're not listening to what I'm saying, man. You're not supposed to have anything extraordinary.
Oh, sorry about that. I don't mean to impose upon your goodwill.
Well, speaking of goodwill, that gets amortized over a period not exceeding 10 years.
Wow, in the States, we don't amortize it at all. We simply test it for an impairment. Well, I've got one more question for you, Duncan. When would you recognize a contingency under the standards?
It would be recognized when the occurrence is more likely than not.
Then I suppose under international standards, I would be more likely to present something because under GAAP, we typically look at something somewhere in the realm of, 80%. Well, I hear my helicopter approaching, so it's time for me to go. It's been fascinating chatting with you, Duncan. Thanks so much. Oops, sorry about that, Mr. Monroe. Hi, I'm Steve Ricks. Join us next time when we travel to the birthplace of French fries, Greece.